one theme to the videos at the moment, and that's the wet weather. But things got to be done. So this morning we're going to do a November tour. But first of all, I need to get some chicken feed into the shed. Now what we feed the chickens is layers pellets, and we find that that gives a goodly supply of eggs. We do also use some mixed corn, which if you give it to them at the end of the day, it says that it keeps them warm during the night, so that's a good thing. Well, there's another 2 or 3 bags of that, so I'll do that shortly. In the meantime, let's have a look around the plot. So the raspberry area is getting a bit clearer. The leaves have dropped and I can see what the shape of the land is. But to be honest with you, I've probably taken off enough groundwork projects not to start this one. So we'll see how we get on with the others, and then we'll decide what we're going to do with this. And I'm warming to the idea of putting a weed membrane over the top of this, maybe leveling it out. But it's definitely on hold, and we'll see how we get along at the back end of the winter. The fruit garden is dormant now. The pear tree has dropped all its leaves, and as I mentioned in a previous video, I can start to see my planning for pruning the pear tree, getting the shape back ready for next year. The rhubarb continues to amaze me with these early shoots coming on nicely, and I've had a suggestion or two to put a bucket over those and bring them on for Christmas. See how we go. I've still got to do this weeding around the fruit bushes, where we seem to be able to get a load of weed just in the small gap that's available. The flower garden is looking pretty forlorn now, but that's the way of flower gardens. We've still got some penstemon flowers coming out there, and the fuchsia is really getting established now. That was so tiny and I thought it was dead, but Mrs. K thought otherwise. We're going to have some blossom on there shortly. The chrysanths, this is their time of year, but that one is just splayed out in the middle. It needed a lot more support, and we're going to have to think carefully about what we do with that fella. We've taken some of the darker ones in for cut flowers, but like that other one, it's splayed out in the middle, so they definitely need support. And you can see we've got some new growth on the autumn winter or autumn fruiting raspberry there. There's a couple of runners there as well. Well, I'm going to encourage it in that area and then try and keep it controlled. And the lavender is really nice and bushy, and hopefully next year we'll be able to use that lavender in various things that we make. There's 2 or 3 of them, 4, and I think we've got a 5th one down there, so they're coming on fine. The apples, I've done nothing with the apples this year. They're very young trees and they just need to get established. So this one's got a few leaves left on it. It dropped its only fruit, and that's fine. I just wanted them to get themselves well and truly established in the beds. And this one's got all these wallflowers beneath it, and they're coming on nicely, and I've got some weeding to do in those. But generally the fruit garden is just having a rest, ready for next season. Mr. Mole seems to have left the plot, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mole mounds, which are now beginning to get a bit washed away. He's obviously gone on and upwards towards the top of the plot. What I have been surprised at is wherever we've got currant bushes, we've got phenomenal amounts of buds on them, and hopefully they'll survive, but they certainly do look like they're kicking into action, and that's also true of the black currants, the red currants further down the plot. While the squash beds are well and truly dormant, still got some work to do with those pots along the back there. We'll get to that, but I have been focusing on the groundwork. I've not got any further with this mound, but I have been doing quite a lot with the pond, and we're getting close to the right depth now for the pond. And this morning I was just a bit staggered by how much I'd actually taken out of there, and as you can see, an awful lot of it is clay. So there's still a lot to do there, but it is so wet you can actually see the water running over the clay, and I won't be on that until this wet weather starts to diminish. Hopefully it won't be too long. People have made comments about the planned cheesy leeks. I haven't got there yet, but I'm going to get half of these done so that I can get that in the freezer. And cheesy leeks during the winter months, just fabulous. So give it a go if you haven't tried it. Groundwork over here, I'm pleased to say, has started. I got this water tank moved, and this is the bank starting to be taken away, and there's a lot of work to do there, and again, wet weather doesn't really lend itself to it, so I have to be patient and just wait for the right moments. I don't mind the cold, but when it's this wet it does make it really difficult, not least because it churns up all the paths. My celeriacs, you can see we've been eating a few. They are being absolutely fantastic, and anybody who's thinking of growing celeriac, I would recommend it. And this variety Monarch is really very good indeed. Me working on covering up these beds, so they're coming along really well, and the wet weather and the cold weather will do them no harm. They're just prepared with the mulch underneath, ready for the next season. And the Swedes and another bed of celeriac are just available for us to use as the winter months go on. We've got more Swede here. There's some real beauties in here. Look at the size of that. And of course the parsnip, which foliage is really dying back now, but we've had some really good parsnips out here, and there's some giants in here. And one of those parsnips has been feeding us for a whole meal, so there's a good few meals in there yet, and we're taking them out as we go along. I've covered this bed with mulch, as you can see. Looks like we've had a bit of cat action here, but hopefully we won't have too much. But the leeks that were forlorn and laying over after I removed the beans have all stood up now, and I've got high hopes for having some of those at the back end of the winter, and this bed will be ready for use next year and provide some leeks. I'm a bit ashamed of this cabbage. I've got to take it out. I just never get round to it. Everything else seems to be a priority, but I really need to remove it, and probably the net as well. And the cow is developing inside. It's not looking as well as it did. Some of the leaves are falling off, but this Cavallo Nero style cow is doing well, and that's enough cow for us, and it'll be feeding us over the coming weeks. So on the side of the plot, we covered this one very early on, and this of course we're keeping to the sprouts, and they're coming on nicely. I do think we're going to have sprouts on our Christmas dinner, which, to be honest with you, is the sole objective here, so I'm looking forward to that. I've never got to propping them up, and so far I've not seen that I'm going to need to. It seems to hold up quite well in there. And in this bed, which is dormant really, I just put a few turnips, and we've got one or two that are developing. In fact, there's one there that will be ready quite soon, so that just gets a bit of extra out of that dormant bed. The broccoli is doing well, some really good growth on it. Yet again, one of the broccoli has fallen over, so I need to stake him back up. I'll do that when the weather's a little bit less wet, and I can see lots and lots of buds on these red currants, and these bushes are really very well structured now, and I can get to getting these stinging nettles out very soon. So quite a few jobs that are stacking up for me, and I'm going to get one nice day and I think I'll hit all these odd jobs in one go. This is another red currant bush covered in those amazing buds. Really good. Well, the wind's had its way with my barrier on the compost bin. I'll cover that up. I was speaking to the gentleman who provides me with horse manure, and another week or two and we'll be moving horse manure again, ready for next year. So I'll carry on emptying this middle bin. I'll have two pretty much empty bins ready for that horse manure. This one I filled with all my own foliage and waste, and I'll just put the horse manure straight on top of that. I've not started working on this courgette bed. You will have heard my plans to open it up and make a bigger bed of it, but to be honest with you, when I started that bed or bank and the removal of all that grass on top of the work I'm doing on the pond, I started to think that 3 jobs at once might be a few too many. So I think I'm going to crack on with what I've started before I take on an additional groundwork job. So the raspberries and the courgette bed is going to have to wait, and I suppose both of those can wait. This one, if I really needed to, I could just use in the same way again next year. And the raspberries, well, I might have to clear out some grass and put some membrane over, but I think they'll probably manage through another year if I'm in that position. Blackcurrant area, again covered in buds. I can start to see what I'm going to need to do a bit later on, and the brambles are almost like an evergreen. You can see them very clearly. This actually is that mystery bush which I think ended up as a tayberry, and I'm going to get that out. So that's on my long-term list. Oh, there's so much to do and so little time to do it in, and the weather's not on my side, but we will get there. There's quite a lot of foliage in there to come out. I've got to find a way of restricting the growth of the things that I really don't want in that area. Well, this area that I flattened is certainly staying drier. It's still very soggy, but it's staying drier. If I'd not done this levelling out, we'd have been walking in water here now. So there's a degree of success from what that work eventually produced. My compost recycling is just lying dormant really. In here, if I can get the lid off, you can see that it's got worms right to the surface, and this is going to be all the potato compost. And I was in one of the local suppliers of potatoes the other day, and they're not in yet. Everything's dominated by Christmas naturally, and I haven't seen any seed potatoes, but I'm going to keep a close eye on when they come out. I'm going to get them fairly quickly, I think, just based on the amount of demand there was last year. So everything down here is looking pretty messy. You can see I've started to put soil mounds together from clearing the grass bank at the top of the plot. That'll take no time to level out, but there will come a time when I need to get in here to start putting horse manure in. So along with the other jobs on the plot, getting this at least level so I can work in there is something I'm going to need to think about doing fairly shortly. What I am pleased about is that the garlic has started to sprout already, and there's different varieties in here, but this one in particular you can see is sprouting nicely, and I can see more coming up over here. And the next job on this bed is really just to clear the leaves and a few weeds, and then put a mulch over the top, and that won't hurt the garlic that's growing, but it will help to rejuvenate the bed. And I'll probably take that mulch from over here in one of the compost areas where it's been sitting since last year, and that means I get the least travel distance possible. So not a lot going on. A few of our hanging baskets, trying to keep the geraniums ready for next year. This is a collection of our plants from the garden. Again, just making sure they don't get too much of a battering. I just need to keep those watered. Carrots are still feeding us well. You can see in there are plenty more, and there's one in there that looks a bit like an octopus, but it's all good. It'll be good food over the coming months. And this bed just needs clearing out now. The seeds I left to dry a bit further, and they are looking ready to be packeted up, and there's a few beans still to dry out, most of them coming on nicely. One positive for all this rain is that the water bath area is nearly full. So we've got 6 there, and they're virtually full already, and by the time we get to the end of November they'll probably be overflowing. I've just got a simple system in here where they're joined together and the water runs from this main one into the others. Something seems to have gone a bit awry here because there's no connection between that one and this one, but I don't seem to have any problems at the moment in filling them up. Well, it's going to be a fairly short video today. The rain is lashing down. It's coming across the mountains in swathes, and I've got a few things to empty out the car, including getting the rest of that chicken feed into the shed. So I'm going to sign off and wish you a dry weekend, or hope you've had a dry weekend wherever you are. So from South Wales, see you soon. I do hope you enjoyed the video today. If you did, click the subscribe button, click the like button, and if you want updates from me each time I upload a video, click the bell and select all. I do hope you have a great day. Diolch yn fawr.